All right, everyone. Welcome to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. This is Aaron Breitman, your host and co-founder, coming to you Monday morning, the day after Rutgers was left out of the 2023 NCAA Tournament. Obviously, a lot to process. Still don't think I've personally processed it all. Obviously, heartbreaking. Very tough to take. And certainly, I think it's true, for sure, that Rutgers they they put themselves in a position to be snubbed. I don't think they should have been. I think that they did do enough, but at the end of the day, the committee. I think what's so fascinating about Rutgers being left out is that the committee essentially admitted that they ignored their own criteria in certain instances, and that's they really harped on the mag injury, and obviously Rutgers went 3-7 without mag. Not good. Lost two of those four. Obviously, the committee cited the 4 quad 3 losses. 2 of those came without mag. They also cited the poor out of conference schedule, which is interesting. And I guess maybe I'll kind of dive into that, because what I feel like is, Rutgers had a very similar out of conference schedule last year and performed much worse in it than they did this year. If there was a year to kind of quote unquote teach Rutgers a lesson with their out of conference schedule, you would think that it would have been last year. Did they get pushback on that? Do they regret that? I don't know. But then to kind of cite that this year, and the committee chair, even mentioned the loss to Miami, which was at Miami. Miami won the ACC. And so in regard to the out-of-conference schedule, not having any kind of what they considered quality wins out of the out-of-conference schedule, having those 4 quad 3 losses, and then the loss of mag was kind of, in a nutshell, why they were left out, the justification of the committee. So that's why I think when he cited Temple and Miami, those were also games where Rutgers was missing key starters. So, how our injuries are they weighted evenly, from start to finish, and from because Rutgers did get McConnell and Mulcahy back. They were missing both in the Temple game. It was McConnell's first game back against Miami, or second game back, excuse me, and Mulcahy was out. And that's one of those losses that we'll look back on, and obviously really hurt, because Rutgers was up 11 points in that second half. If they would have won that game, that really would have been a really nice win to have on the resume. But again, they're without their starting point guard. So to reference those 2 losses, I thought was interesting. Rutgers did beat Wake Forest, not a great win, but when I'm starting to compare and look at resumes, when you look at Providence's best non-conference win was against Rider on opening night by 1 point at home, and Rider was sub 200 KenPom. Rutgers beat Rider by double digits at home and have better out of conference win than Wake. Providence had 11 Q4 games. They went 11-0. Rutgers had 7. So it's just when the committee cites the out of conference as an issue, and then you look at Providence, and yes, Providence had some big wins in the Big East, and then when they cite mag going down the stretch, 3-7. Providence went 4-6. They did have losses to some really good teams, Connecticut and Xavier, but so did Rutgers, and Providence lost their home regular season finale to quad 3 Seton Hall by 24 points. Rutgers lost to them by 2. So listen, it's never apples or oranges. And I'm not even saying, Providence doesn't deserve to get in. But I think when you look at the resume of Providence and NC State getting, the last two byes, I don't look at their resumes as being, Rutgers being that far apart, 6 slots back. It just seems pretty incredible. NC State was 1-6 against quad one opponents. The ACC was terrible this year. So, I get the whole thing about out of conference, but then when you look at, in terms of overall net strength of schedule, overall RPI strength of schedule, Rutgers better than Providence. And I think the Big Ten, the strength of schedule is really high. I mean, to not, if every game is evaluated equally, then why does out of conference get kind of pulled separately? And I think because it's, the committee wants you to schedule certain games in non-conference, and I get that. And listen, I'm all for Rutgers scheduling more difficultly in non-conference. I think it's debatable though whether that makes sense. I do. I think, Rutgers' biggest problem the last 2 years is they suffered losses that, in games and to opponents that on paper they should have won. And that's where, the blame can shift to Rutgers. I mean, there were games that, when you lose your last 3 home games by double digits, one of which to Nebraska, who, again, is not a bad team and played really well down the stretch. But one was to Michigan, which is in the NIT, was not really on the bubble after Rutgers beat them in the Big Ten tournament. Nebraska, which, didn't even make the NIT. And then Northwestern, which is a legitimate, quality loss per se. But if the committee is looking at how Rutgers fare without Mag, and they pulled that stat out, the last 3 home games in a place where Rutgers has almost been unbeatable in the last 3-4 years, and then they lose the last 3 by double digits. I mean, that's a fair knock on Rutgers for sure. I think the win at Penn State was a huge win, and Penn State was unconscious ever since, picked up 5 quad one wins after that, and almost pulled a stunner on Purdue in the Big Ten title game. But I think that also, they only got a 10 seed, and I think that, and there's some discussion of, did Penn State bump Rutgers out? Did the committee basically commit to only allowing 8 Big Ten teams in the field? And once Penn State kind of went on that run, it knocked Rutgers out. I mean, it does seem, based on the committee's comments, that, the conference tournament really had no bearing, at least from a Rutgers perspective, in terms of their consideration, because, they obviously looked much better. I think that was the consensus. They looked like they were turning the corner. They had made some adjustments, obviously with Simpson, with Woolfolk, and just the starters. Everybody played better. They looked better. They gave Purdue all they could handle. And now I'm wondering, it'd be fascinating to go back, and if Rutgers beat Purdue a second time, would they even still be in? Or was it a win the Big Ten situation or not, or out? Because it doesn't seem like those 2 games were really taken into account. The committee referenced Rutgers only having 1 quad 1 win without Mag, which is true. The Wisconsin game fell off. Penn State was the only one. But again, going back to NC State, they had 1 quad 1 win their entire year. And, Rutgers just had 1 without Mag in 10 games. I mean, it's a little ridiculous. I think what's concerning, and, basically with the committee saying that they weighted the loss of Mag, is they essentially threw out the predictive metrics, because all the predictive metrics had Rutgers, Rutgers has fared extremely well in them against all other bubble teams. They had the second best net, which is, results based. But KenPom, BPI, Sagarin, all were the best of Rutgers of like 9 bubble teams. They had the best. So all those are predictive metrics. Second best KPI, the best Torvik rank, second best strength of schedule overall. The negatives were the 4 quad 3 losses, and the poor out of conference schedule. But when you have the best best schedule overall, or second best of the bubble teams, that's where, why does the out of conference then become a negative if your overall strength of schedule is still strong? that just seems agenda based. I don't know. So obviously very frustrating. Again, Rutgers could have avoided this. They were in tremendous shape in the beginning of February. And, you got out that win against Michigan State at the Garden. You're 8-4, 16-7. And, they just unfortunately took too long to figure things out post-MAG. And, it's a credit to the team and a credit to the coaching staff that they were able to figure it out in the Big Ten tournament. It's a shame that we won't be able to see them continue that in the NCAA tournament. I did mention in my recap yesterday, it's fair to wonder, I think, should some of those adjustments been made sooner? Was it a natural evolution of kind of development, for Simpson to evolve as he did? Or should he been implemented in a bigger role sooner? Looking back on it, I think at a minimum, if you look at the Minnesota game, which we will take to the grave, at least I will, I think most Rutgers fans would admit to that. Maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. Maybe that sounds nuts, but I mean it. After the Penn State game and Simpson performed the way he did, he only played 13 minutes against Minnesota. I thought of any time where he wasn't on the floor that I thought was egregious was at the end. When they lost that 10-point lead with 1:15 to go. It gives you an extra ball handler. He's an 80% free throw shooter. He was not on the court. I don't believe if he was on the court that final 1:15, it wasn't much. And I think I think it was just a little bit maybe slow in making that adjustment. All that being said, as upsetting as this is, as disappointing as it is, I think it's important to separate that disappointment and look at the reality of the shape of the program moving forward and still be encouraged. The fact that, Simpson is just a freshman. Woolfolk, really came on at the end. He's just a freshman. Everyone on this roster can potentially come back next season with the exception of Caleb McConnell. Will Cliff come back? Will Paul come back? We don't know. You have Gavin Griffiths coming in, the highest recruit to ever sign. Ace Bailey is the highest to commit, but he's not signed yet. And no, I'm not overly concerned about this finish, potentially changing his commitment, his verbal commitment. But Gavin Griffiths is coming in, gives them a second shooter with Cam Spencer. There's the roster, I think, certainly is going to change. I think there will be some departures. I think Rutgers is going to have to hit the portal hard. I think, and I said this to a degree in my reaction video yesterday, but, Pico definitely needs to reevaluate everything, and again, it's not just pull the Band-Aid off or just try to change things for the sake of changing them or that he needs to blow anything up, because he doesn't, because a lot of things are working. But, it's clear that depth hurt this team, a lack of depth. I think especially after the MAG injury, how much the starters played in terms of minutes. If you look back from years past, I mean, they played a lot more minutes in years past, but 30 plus. Where that 2019-2020 team, nobody averaged over 29 minutes a game. And you had your starters playing, 32 minutes this year. So that does add up. And they were playing more than that, without MAG. They were all playing about 35, even more in some cases. So the lack of depth definitely caught up to them. And I think that's a roster evaluation. That's something that needs to be looked at. And I'm not saying sacrifice, principles. Absolutely cannot. But, I think looking at depth moving forward is important. Looking at your schedule moving forward is important. Again, I don't know. I think it's a conflicting message. I think that it feels like the committee wanted to make Rutgers an example for their out-of-conference schedule, but at the same time ignored others. So I don't know what the message is. Is the message just, basically don't lose games you're supposed to win? I think that's probably the biggest message. And, Rutgers did a much better job of it this year against quad 4 games. Again, the Temple game had some circumstances without Mulcahy and McConnell. If those guys played, I think they win that game. Nebraska and Seton Hall, I don't consider bad losses. But the Seton Hall game also kind of was a hangover effect of the Ohio State game, which, is another kind of what if and a difficult pill to swallow with the Big Ten admitting that the winning shot should not have counted. I did report that, it was confirmed the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee would take that into account. And I believe that to be true, and I stand by what I reported. I just don't think that it mattered when it came down to what the committee disqualified Rutgers for, which was not having Mag and playing the way they did, and the losses they suffered, the quad 3 losses they suffered. So there's a lot to ponder, and Rutgers certainly in the last 2 years has had some really, really big wins and some bad losses. And it's that inconsistency, I think, honestly, there is a correlation to depth there. I think there is, because you're relying so much on your starters both years, and your starting lineup is very, very good. Listen, the best teams, they don't play huge rotations. But I think what they do have is they have high-end talent, that can replace production and starters lost. And, listen, I'm not trying to say that Rutgers is ever going to have, 4 and 5 stars riding the bench. That's not what I mean. I just think that the development and the readiness of the starters versus the end of the bench is vast. And I think it hurt them. And I'm not saying, that's easy to fix. I don't know. But some of them, most of them, I didn't see one projection that had Rutgers as the last team in. They all were, most projections I saw, they either were the top of the last 4 in, so basically the 4th team in, or had one of the 2 buys at the 11th seed. I even saw some 10 seed projections. This was as of Sunday. So I think the fact that so many experts, per se, totally missed on Rutgers shows that the committee went off the grid with their own criteria. And yeah, the injury obviously comes. And it's true. Rutgers did struggle without Mag and did not look like the same team for a while. But, I think their 3 wins were all quality. And I think that their performance in the Big Ten tournament, showed that they were figuring it out. And yes, I guess the committee is saying they needed to figure it out sooner. And that's unfortunate. Obviously, I think it's fair that you can be upset with the committee and the decisions that were made and some of the teams that were included over Rutgers. And at the same time, you can be upset with how Rutgers performed the last month of the season and how they were in such a great position and let it slip away. That's also complicated. There's been injuries. I think this team is obviously worn down. I think, and we know Caleb McConnell has been playing with an injured back. I believe Paul Mulcahy's dealing with at least something because he hasn't, he played well in the Big Ten tournament, I thought, but before that, hadn't looked like himself at all. And who knows what else they're dealing with. But, and people wouldn't say injuries are excuse. Well, it's just reality. I mean, I think it impacted the way this team played for sure. And again, that speaks to depth, right? I think that goes back to that. So It's fair to be upset about both. You could be upset about the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. I think, the fact that they did seem to veer off their own criteria specifically for Rutgers is very frustrating. And at the same time, it's fair to be frustrated that Rutgers put themselves in a position to get snubbed like this. Both can be true, and I think I think they both are true. And so it's not a lot of good, a lot of good feelings. It's pretty awful, and yes, big picture. I mean, again, we went 3 decades with really not ever being on the bubble. So now we've been on the bubble for 3 years in a row. It's a good problem to have. This would have been a program record 3rd straight, really would have been 4th if not for COVID. So that's unfortunate, that fell off. But again, big picture, this program is still in very good shape. And I think that, there's a very good chance that what happened, the pain and suffering of being excluded can benefit the program in the long term. And as fans, this is one we got to take on the chest, and it's a mark, mark down to a badge of honor per se, in terms of our fandom for this program, and one to remember when this program does have better days and does make the NCAA tournament again and wins another NCAA tournament game, and who knows how far they can go in upcoming seasons. But this is one that we will always remember. This season, this snub, it was a very hard season to cover, a very hard season to be a fan of, a very good season to be a fan of, a very good season to cover. I mean, it was really both ways. I'm exhausted, and it's hard. It's hard. It's something that we're never gonna forget, and it's something that I'm looking forward to. You never have full closure. I mean, when you get this close to an NCAA tournament bid, I'm sorry. I mean, and listen, I'm a well-adjusted, adult. I have, 2 amazing kids, an unbelievable wife, and I'm extremely happy in my life, and I have a very good career. So I'm not, I guess I should put that out there for context. But in terms of my context as a Rutgers fan, I take that very seriously. And, this is really hard. And something to always, it's part of us being a fan now. This season is part of our fabric of being a Rutgers fan, and every season adds to that. But this season, is thicker than most, for lack of a better description. And I think that, that's fair to acknowledge. And it's going to, I mean, I don't mean to sound tragic, but yeah, I mean, I'll never fully get over this season, in terms of not making the NCAA tournament. When you get that close to making the NCAA tournament and you don't, I saw a comment, well, they'll just make it next year. Well, okay, but how do you tell that to your team this year? And that was my question to Peichel in the Zoom call. What was your message to the team? And, he basically admitted that there's not much you can say in a situation like this. And I think that that's completely true. What can you say? I mean, as a coach and a staff, they have to evaluate, right? But in terms of the heartbreak for that team, those players, that they'll never get over it. And as fans, we never will either. And I think that obviously is really hard to take. And but it's also why we love sports, and it's why I've experienced when your teams do get over that hump and they do win in big ways, it makes these heartaches and these losses and these setbacks, all the more. It makes the journey to success all the more sweeter, and that's how I'm going to choose to kind of look at what happened. And I think when you see so many national media and Big Ten media and Big Ten fan bases saying that Rutgers got hosed, and They don't know the RU screw term, but when they're vouching for Rutgers and saying how bad they feel for Rutgers, I think that's, the ultimate sign of respect and something that should not be taken lightly. And then when you have fan bases chirping at Rutgers and us, and I get it a little bit, in terms of on social media, I think that's also in a way a sign of respect. It's almost like an insecurity of other fan bases, recognizing Rutgers is good and maybe feeling threatened and, wanting to pile on now. Rutgers is no longer irrelevant, and they were for a long time. And I'm not saying to take that as a victory today, but, things are far different than they used to be. And I think that at the end of the day, the program will get better from this. I do. I think that there will be a chip on their shoulder moving forward. I think that Pike will evaluate certain things. I think that they will get better as a program. And, I just think there's a lot to be encouraged by moving forward. And I'm really fascinated to see this offseason, what's going to happen with the roster. I don't want to go too far into that because the season is not over. They host Hofstra on Tuesday night at the RAC, first round in the NIT. Rutgers is a 1 seed. The winner of that game will play in the coming weekend, the winner of Virginia Tech and Cincinnati. And the other half of the region is Seton Hall at Colorado and Utah Valley at New Mexico. So, I think the NIT could go one of two ways. I think they have the potential to make a serious run for the title. We saw in 2004, they lost in the title game to Michigan. The Final Four for the NIT this year, by the way, is no longer at Madison Square Garden. It's in Las Vegas. And, I think it's going to, I think it's going to be very challenging for this team to 48-hour turnaround from last night to tomorrow night, to host an NIT game against a good Hofstra team that won the Colonial Athletic Association regular season title, tied with Charleston, but beat them head-to-head. Charleston got the automatic berth to the NCAA tournament because they didn't even meet. Hofstra got upset in the second round of the CAA conference tournament. They lost to UNC Wilmington. But they have 3 wins against the field, against Iona, Princeton, and Charleston. So they're a good team, and Speedy Claxton's a coach. They have Aaron Estrada is their CAA Player of the Year. He's really good. So it's going to be a tough game. And I honestly, I don't know if Rutgers is going to be mentally up for the challenge, and I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily even blame them if they're not. But it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to play. It's an opportunity to get better. It's an opportunity for the younger guys to get more experience. So I hope that they do play well, and I hope they do make a run here. Nothing would be better for them at this point to make a statement, but then just run through the whole NIT and win it. And, really good programs have won the NIT lately. Last year was Xavier. The year before was Memphis. Texas won it before that. Penn State won it before that. And I'm forgetting the 5th team, but those are all teams that, are now in the NCAA tournament. So there is something to build off of this opportunity, and I hope that they take advantage. The last thing I forgot to mention about Rutgers candidacy is 7 wins against the projected field. I thought that was a major, major thing in their favor, aside from Purdue, at Purdue, the best win in the field. I really thought those 2 things were going to carry them. 7 wins against the field. Only 15 teams had more. Only 3 others had 7. So I thought that was really going to be a big differentiator. It wasn't. But I think and I think that's where it kind of negates the whole silly out of conference schedule. Like, they didn't beat anyone. Okay. But they have, they're top 20 in terms of most wins against the field. Like, are you just looking for reasons? So I'll have plenty more to process and thoughts on all of this in the days and weeks to come. And once the offseason hits, obviously. But I'm really intrigued by what this offseason can bring. And I hope that Rutgers can make a run here in the NIT. And just in closing, very, very tough 24 hours like I said, you come this close to the NCAA tournament and you're playing the way Rutgers was. The Mag injury will go down as one of the great what ifs in program history. If he stays healthy, where does this team go? How far do they go? There's no question they'd be in the NCAA tournament. The question is, how far would they go once they were in there? And of course, we'll never know that, but that makes it all the more painful as well. So in regard to Mag, I just hope that he does get healthy and whatever timeline that is, and he's able to get back at the level that he was playing, because obviously not only would that be great for Rutgers, but just for him personally and the journey he's made. I've had him on the podcast before. He's a great kid. He's come a long way, and he's a kind of the, I think, poster child for player development in this program right now in terms of what they made him this year. If you think about some of the questions, and I've said, the whole idea of this was a bridge year and Rutgers wasn't expected to do much, I think that that's overplayed. I think, they were picked 8th in the Big Ten. I was upset about that. I was hoping, listen, I think the program's at a level where every year the hope should be to make the NCAA tournament. Is it fair to expect it year after year? I think that maybe that's debatable, but I think that should be that should be the hope. And I think that things are stable enough that they should be good enough to do that. It's not going to happen every year, but the more that Rutgers can do that, the better, obviously. And I think that they're built for that. And you lose Ron Harper Jr., you lose Geo Baker, but they came so close to still making it. And maybe that's more of a positive than I'm making it out to be, but that is where the program should be now, and that's a good thing. High expectations. Making the NCAA tournament every year is where this team should be. Winning 10 games in the Big Ten every year is where they should be. They're one of 4 Big Ten programs to do that the last 4 years. They win the 4th Big Ten program to go to the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row. So, consistency matters. Progressing and making the leap as a program matters. There's a lot, the next year is going to be really important for Rutgers to do, to make a forward progress. And we'll see. But I think that this program has a lot to be proud of. Fans have a lot to be proud of with this program. And while this was a huge disappointment, I do think that there will be positives that come out of this. Really, feel for the players. And I feel for other Rutgers fans, and it's never easy being a Rutgers fan. This year proved that more than most. And all we can do is move forward. Again, Hofstra. And really excited about the future. So I'll have more this week and throughout the offseason, of course, on Rutgers men's basketball. It's not, this is not my career. This is not my job, but this is my passion. Obviously covering all of Rutgers athletics, but Rutgers basketball, specifically is something I've been invested in since I was a child. So I will have plenty more. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for reading my content. And thank you again for listening here at The Scarlet Faithful.